good.
From doing it for herself, yeah. Finding.
How about your mama? How's she?
She's doing okay. She's pretty
You've seen
feeble,
her
but
a long time.
she don't hardly get out, but she's in good spirits and
She used to come to the store a lot.
yeah, yeah, she's doing okay. Okay, well, let's start with just your name. Of course, I know you, but you tell your name and where you were born.
Okay, get my full name?
Yeah.
My full name is James Clay Logan. I was born in Brasstown, raised in Brasstown. I was born in 1946, November the 2nd, and went to Ogden School for 8 years and then on to Hayesville High School. I've never been to Hayesville but about twice in my life when I went to high school up there because Brasstown, the town was always Murphy for us to go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was like that, I think, for Daddy's family too.
Yeah.
What about your family? Can you tell us a little bit about it, your mother and your father? Did you have siblings?
Right. My daddy's name was Hilliard Logan, and my mama's name was Elizabeth Zimmerman, which was two sides of the political side. My mother's side was raised a Democrat, my daddy's side was raised Republican. And that was always a controversy a little bit, you know, growing up because we lived with my grandpa, Grandpa Zimmerman, so he always tried to give me a quarter to get me to be a Democrat when I was little.
Yeah.
You know.
So did you have siblings though?
I've had two sisters and one brother, and I had one brother that passed away after he was born about 10 or 15 days.
What did your mother and father do? Did your father work?
Daddy worked at Coble Dairy for a long time because, you know, Coble was just up the road about 200 yards or so. And he did carpentry work and he farmed. So, and Mama, she was a stay-at-home till Peachtree, what was it called? Peachtree Products, I believe, and where they wound bobbins and stuff. So she worked there in her later years. So. But she was a stay-at-home mom all the time. The two sisters was the oldest, June and Jane, and June's still alive. She lives in Marietta, Georgia. She's about 82, I think now, so she's still doing good. And my second sister, she smoked a lot, so she got lung cancer, and she died at about 51 years old, so she was pretty young.
Oh, yeah.
And my father also died at 51 years old. And and then my brother, my older brother, he passed away about 3 years ago. He was like 73 when he died. So the oldest and the youngest is still alive.
Oh, wow. So did you stay in Brasstown, or did you move away and come back, or did you kind of hang out here?
Well, you know, I rode up here in Brasstown, and I'd go to the Caldwell store at least once a week when they'd let me. And it's sort of always my dream is to own that store, you know. I don't know why, but it was anyhow. But no, I graduated from high school in '65, and that's when Vietnam was going real strong, and they had the draft, so I know that I was going to be drafted. So myself and Lonnie Owens, we decided to volunteer for the draft, which if you volunteered, I think it was like 3 years, but if you volunteered for the draft, it's just 2 years. But we volunteered for the draft hoping that we could at least get through basic training together.
Yeah.
Well, we went to Knoxville, Tennessee for an examination, and the Marines drafted him, and I went to the Army, so we got to spend 2 nights together out of all that time, hoping we could spend at least through basic training, but it never happened. And then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for for my training, basic training. And then I went to Aberdeen Improving Ground for my advanced training, which is a wheel vehicle mechanic. And then I came back to Fort Benning, and while I was there at Fort Benning, they called me into the office one day and asked me if I'd like to go TDY up in North Georgia. And I thought, man, I don't know much about Georgia, but I know North Georgia is real close to where I live.
Yeah.
So I went TDY up there to the ranger station up there in Dahlonega, Georgia. So it was, I can tell you, it's exactly 63 miles from my house to the ranger camp. So, but I'd come home, you know, every other weekend when I could, 'cause we worked like 2 weeks at a time before we'd get any time off. So, and then my father passed away. In the meantime, my brother got drafted, and my father passed away. He was 51-year-old in 1966, and I done went through basic training, and I've done doing my job in the Army, and then they sent him to Fort Benning. So I was down there one weekend because I'd have to go down every 2 or 3 weeks and get a truckload of food and ammunition, with blanks, and for the ranger training. And I went to where he was at, and I said, look, you know, Daddy's got a farm, you know, he's got cattle, he's got corn, he's got hay, he's got hogs. Somebody's got to be there.
Right.
So I said, why don't you've just been here a week or two, why don't you get out? And he said, no, you've done got your time in to where if you ever need the VA, you'd have it.
Right.
And he said, you get out, I'm gonna stay. And I said, well, I'd rather you, but he said, no, I'm staying. So I applied for a hardship and got it. I was in about a year, somewhere around a year and 2 or 3 months. And I finally got my hardship come through, and so I come home. So no, I haven't been anywhere except away from Clay County, except that year in the Army. So
yeah. So when you come back, you just started farming, and then
I came back and took up
what your dad
what
had
Dad
done.
had, and I killed my first hog by myself. You know, I've been in on a lot of hog killing for 6 or 8, 10 years, as long as I can remember. But I had to kill this, and of course, we had the company, local people around it help come and help kill. And my daddy used to kill hogs for people for a mess of meat. And then a few years later, he got, they wanted him 6 or 8 different places to kill hogs. So he started charging them $5, so they quit using it.
Oh, gosh. They had the meat, but they weren't going to give up the cash.
They wasn't going to give, $5, a lot of money, I guess, back then.
Yeah,
but
sure.
killing hogs
is a job.
Is a full day. If you just kill one, it's a full day.
Yeah.
But that stopped his career as killing hogs.
Yeah. So then once you'd come back, you did work though for the Forest Service, didn't you?
I started off, when I come back, I applied for a job at the school, which was sort of a political job, and I got it as a maintenance supervisor up there for Clay County Schools, which at that time we had Shooting Creek and Elf and Ogden and Hayesville. And I applied for that job and got it. And I worked it for about 6 years till the politics changed back, and I was no longer needed in that position, Politics used to be big back then time. But then I went to work with Wayne Holler, Wayne and Bill Tipton. They had the feed company, and I was the field manager of all the chicken houses. I had to go check on them and check on their health and bring their checks to them and stuff like that. And I worked that for 3 or 4 years, and then in the meantime, I laid carpet on the side because, by that time I was married, and there just wasn't much income.
Right, yeah.
And so I laid carpet at nighttime and on the weekends. And then a job came open with the Forest Service in Clay County. And I applied for that job and I got it, but it was a temporary job. So I still had to lay carpet, you know, all the time. And then I decided to run for political office. And I was informed that I couldn't run for political office because the federal government gives some money to the state to help do the Forest Service, and I was violating what they call the Hatch Act. Well, come find out years later, I wasn't violating it, but at that time, you know, the politics said I was. So they said, you either have to step down or quit your job. And I said, well, I'm not going to do neither one. So they said, well, we'll have to fire you. And I said, well, so they came and fired me. But at least I forced them to do it, you know. And then later on, I went back with the Forest Service. It's temporary in Peachtree. And in 1988, there was a job on me come with the U.S. Forest Service, which is equipment operator and stuff down at the Beach Creek Seed Orchard. So I went down there and I applied for the job. And while I was applying for the job, the Scruggs Caldwell store came open. It was run by some people from up north, and local peoples for the Clannish, you know, and they didn't patronize them any, you know. So they stayed open about 6 months. So the store came up, and my wife was working for Foursquare, working with daycare kids, and she'd come home sick every week. Whatever they had, she had. You know, migraine headaches and all this stuff. And I said, honey, I'd like to buy that store down there. And she said, well, I'd like to do anything except what I'm doing. And so we bought it. And we bought it in June of '88. And I got the job in July. July the 4th was my first day on the job, which was a holiday. And I said, you know, I'm gonna like this place, I can tell you. Got a holiday my first day. But anyhow, we got the store set up in that month's time from June to July and got her, you know, a little comfortable running it because I'd come down at 6 o'clock and open it up and, you know, build a fire or whatever and get everything going. And then I had to be at work at 7 o'clock. So, and then I'd come back at 5 and she'd come home and of course the boys would come to the store and then she'd take them home and feed them and get them ready for school the next day. So that worked. It's pretty good, but it was long hours for all of us, both of us. And then I worked Saturdays and Sundays, so I worked 7 days a week for 11 years. Wow. And I got to the point that I was just a zombie. You know. So we quit Sundays, and then we dropped from 9 o'clock at night down to 6 o'clock. So that gave me, that's 11 years I've never mowed my yard because, you know.
You wasn't there,
So I had all kinds of time. Get home at 6 o'clock in the summertime and I'd grow a good garden and mow my yard and everything. But, but no, I've never left Clay County. I've had no reason to. Now, when I did work for the school at one time, I was offered a job in Asheville as their maintenance supervisor out there at Asheville City Schools. And I thought, man, I don't want to raise my children in town or in a city. That's what a town is, a city. So I didn't take the job. But I wanted to raise them here in Clay County, which I did. And
let's go back though to thinking about when you were a child and then the differences, because you've spent so much time in Brasstown. But like when you were young, what did people do for fun? What did teenagers or even children? What was your what was your fun things to do?
Well, you know, growing up, I lived, I guess, a mile from my neighbor, so we didn't interact much in the evenings because the time we had chores to do, I'd get the cows in and Daddy milk and my brother get the wood in and me, I love softball. I love playing softball. That was my thing in Ogden. And I'd get my glove and ball and I'd throw it up on the side of the barn and catch it, you know. I'd practice for hours at a time like that. So, but we didn't interact much because there wasn't nobody, you know, not like living in town.
Yeah.
You know, you had neighbors real close, the kids would go out and play, but we didn't have that. Every now and then, on the weekends, there'd be kids come and we'd get into some kind of corn cob throwing or something, you know, and stuff like that. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that connection with people close enough to interact.
Right.
You know? So, and my brother, he read all the time, and he never was out much. And me, I was always down at the barn or doing something, you know, feeding and playing ball, but there wasn't a whole lot of interaction going on except yourself, you know. Use your own imagination.
Right. What about when you got a little older, since the folk school's here? Did you go to the dances? Was that part of the community?
Yes, the folk school. Folk school was my lifeline. You know, as quick as I got 12, 13, I started going to, what they call it? They call it Little Middle now. We used to call it just the little folk school.
Yeah.
And when I was 5 and 6 years old, I went to that and made little paper puppets and learned to dance. And I loved to dance. And then the older I got, I'd go every Friday night. I never missed a dance at the folk school on Friday night. And I got good enough that Marguerite let me go to Asheville when they had the Craftsman's Fair out there for a week. I'd go out there with a dance team, you know, Bill and Barbara Tipton and Carol Jean Smith and myself and let's see, at least 4 couples. Yeah. And we go out there and dance for a week, and I loved it. Now that's a job.
Yeah.
You dance from 10 to 12 at morning, and from 2 to 4 at evening, and then from 6 to 8 that night.
Yeah.
You'd give out.
Yeah.
That's about the 3rd day. You was really, really sore.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I went to Berea for a Christmas dance week up there. So folk school educated me.
Yeah. Corey and Katie and I used to go with Bob Dawsmer to Berea to the Mountain Folk Festival, and that was just a weekend, but you're dancing, like you said, for 8 hours, pretty much all day long, but lots of fun. So you were saying your chore was to help with the cows and milk, and your brother's was to get in wood. Kind of all of you, your siblings, just had chores, and that's what you had to do, responsibilities. Yeah.
And then I'd have to get up about 6 o'clock in the morning and go down to the lower end of the field, barefooted, because I didn't have one pair of shoes, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd have to go down there and them old soul drawers run through your toes. Oh.
Yeah.
And the cow wouldn't come in. I'd have to drive her in every morning, you know. And then I'd go back and take a bath and clean up and go to school. But I all had something to do.
When you were talking about earlier about the like killing your first hog, Daddy would often tell me things like that you in those times, because there wasn't much to do, that you looked forward to, whether it was hog killing, but was there other, because it was kind of like you said, a community, and people would come together, maybe sorghum making, things like that.
Oh yeah, we had a syrup mill. Daddy made syrup one year, and your grandpa Wade was the guy that boiled it down, I guess. I don't know what the title was. Boil it down is what we call it. And he's the guy that run the pan, you know. And they'd bring it in and squeeze it and run it over there to a barrel, and I'd have to take a pitchfork and drag them plumbings way off down there in the field. It got to be a big pile, you know. And we growed an acre for the Lord You know, that's back when people used to, didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, Acre that cane went to the, I guess, the church, and they
Yeah.
sold it and got their money that way. So
Yeah.
it's called the Acre for the Lord. I remember doing that. And that was, I guess that was Daddy used to have a slip pan with horses, and he'd go into the creek and pull out gravel, you know, and sell gravel that way. But just gardening and farming is, you know, my daddy never owned a vehicle. He never got his driver's license. He had a team, a horse and a mule and a wagon, and when he worked, people would come by and pick him up or something and take him when he done carpenter work, or he'd walk up to Cold But I owned the first vehicle that we had in our family. You know, when I turned 16, I traded up one. And it's funny, I traded this old 54 Chevrolet, I believe. It's a good old car, but it got to knocking. You know, and everybody said, oh, it's blowed up, it's blowed up. Well, Hoss Flemings, you know Hoss Flemings? You ever know him?
I think I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. Hoss come over, and I sold it to him for $150 or $100 or something. And he drove it home. And back then they had an old breather cap on it that you put oil in, and that's the way they filtered the air out with oil and a filter. Well, the filter screw was loose on top of it. Now, I was 16-year-old, I didn't know nothing about a car. He tightened that thing down and the knocking went away. Oh, he aggravated me about that for years to come, you know. Buying that car that was blowed up.
Yeah. So the house that you lived in there with your grandpa, is that y'all lived there your whole growing up years? You didn't move anywhere else in Brasstown?
Yeah.
Well, that's neat that you stayed there. You didn't. Daddy's family traveled all over in the same area, but all over from house to house. Yeah.
We and then Mama was the baby, so when Grandpa died, she got the house, and so that we growed up there, lived there. For 16, 18 years till I went into the service and then come back and got married.
Yeah. Did your family have any kind of traditions? Of course, the main one in your later life was the possum drop, but even when you think about Thanksgiving or things like that, did your family celebrate Thanksgiving? Granny and Pap said they did not when they were growing up.
You know, we did the meal, whatever. I don't know where it was turkey every time.
Yeah.
You know, but we did. We did the meal. I remember one time when I was about 5 or 6 years old, these Mickey Mouse watches come out on your arm. And boy, I wanted one of them so bad. And I stayed on Daddy there for a week or two. And heck, he probably wasn't making $20 a week, you know, working at Cobra's, whatever. Then one Friday, he come walking in and he had me a Mickey Mouse watch. Boy, I never have forgot that.
Yeah, how happy.
Oh, I was tickled to death, you know. A Mickey Mouse watch. That's top of the line back then. That's when Mickey was big, you know. And I think it cost $5.
Yeah, so
you know,
a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably a fourth of each week's pay, you know.
Yeah.
But
that's a great memory.
yeah, we had a lot of family interaction, you know, and as far as holidays and Christmas and all the events, and then Daddy went on the first wagon train. He had a workhorse, but he rode her to Tellico Plains and back. You know, that's where the first one went. To Tellico Plains and back. So and then I remember one time. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years after the first one, it was always on the 4th of July. And we was right there at the racetrack. You know where the racetrack's at? Right there on the road. And we had a little tobacco patch. We had a dozen tobacco patches around everywhere. We had a little tobacco patch right there. And I remember 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, people driving up and down the road blowing, hollering, we're going to the wagon train. And I said, Dad, are we going to get to go? And he said, well, if we get this work done, we probably will. And you talk about getting in high gear.
You got it done.
We got her done.
Yeah,
We got to
yeah.
go to the wagon train, you know.
So for people that are not familiar with the wagon train, you want to explain what it is in our area? People may have it in their areas too, but here.
Well, actually, it started to bring attention to get a road between Murphy and Tellico Plains. That was the start of it. And people all around came and rode. It took them 2 or 3 days to get down there, and they'd camp and stay down there, and then 2 or 3 days back, and they'd always make it back by 4th of July to have a parade in town, you know. But that was the start of it, and then they never did build the road, but they never did quit the wagon trains.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had the wagon train from, I guess that was in early, maybe 62, 63 is when they started that wagon train, and they've had it ever since. They went somewhere, but the real reason it started was to try to get a road between Murphy and Tellico Plains.
Yeah, so see, I didn't know that. I just thought it's something people did to have fun
Yeah.
and to
Well,
remember the old ways of using
it was
horses and
that
wagons.
too. That's where May Scruggs made. She told them she made over. I read somewhere she made over 100 bonnets for people that had old time days and the 4th of July for them to dress like the old way, and so that's how it got started, and it's still going till today. You know, my brother went on it for years. He loved it. He was a horseman. He never owned a vehicle till he got 25. After he got back out of the army, he never owned a vehicle. He just ride a horse. He loved.
Yeah, I remember seeing him ride horses. Yeah,
He rode
through
horses
Brasstown.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about, of course, when you were young, having to grow a garden. Then you kind of alluded to once you and Judy shortened the hours at Clay's Corner, you got to grow a garden again. So that's kind of been a way of life, is growing food and putting up food for your family.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, it's a way of life with my mom and daddy. We wouldn't have had much food in the wintertime if it wasn't for that. So
Right.
we still do it. I grow, let's see, I've got 1, 2, I've got 3 patches of gardens, little cornfield, and then I've got these 6 or 8 raised beds, and that's the best way to grow things. Even though you can grow tons of stuff in a little raised bed where you can water it and take care of it and fertilize it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I look forward to every spring. I'm ready.
Yeah, me
when this
too.
sun starts
Yeah.
coming down, I get the feeling, you know, I got my but now that our weather has changed so much that we're being so wet. One year I couldn't even use my lower field where I grow my corn because it stayed wet the whole summer.
Yeah.
And it's a real challenge now, and it looks like the pattern's still changing. I mean,
Yeah.
still staying
Still
wet.
staying wet.
you know.
Yeah.
But we've been 2 or 3 days without any weather, and tomorrow and the next day I think supposed to rain.
Yeah.
You know,
Supposed to rain again.
and then another big cold front comes. So.
Yeah. It looks
know,
like
back-
the rain and the cold would coincide and we get a big snow,
Yeah.
but it doesn't.
You know, I've always said back when the Lord had the weather, you could predict it. And now that the government's got it, you don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When your family, going way back, because I'm always interested in those old foodways, and recently Clay got to share one of those with me and Corey, and I can link to that video about milling corn, about fresh cornmeal. But when you think about when you were a child, so of course I'm sure they used crocks to pickle stuff, to ferment stuff. Did they dry a lot of things? Maybe apples? Did they dry pumpkins or any?
Yes, that, and there's nothing any better than dried apple fruit.
Oh, I know.
I mean,
It's so
it-
good.
When you bring it back to life, it's got a brown looking, and they used to make them apple stack cakes. I guess everybody did.
Yeah.
Little thin cakes, and
Yeah.
it'd be 10 or 12 high, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And it'd have that dried apple
Yeah, so
in
good.
them. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And apple pies now that you make apple pies your own, you've got to have that dried fruit to make it.
It imparts some kind of richness
It
to
does.
it. You know,
It does.
drying them
Yeah.
solidifies all those flavors.
Cabbage,
Yeah.
we put a lot, we still put up kraut, but you got to be careful and do it when the signs is wrong.
Right, yeah.
And I dearly believe in that because we did it 2 years in a row, because we were so busy, we didn't even check the sign, and it turned dark on us. And it's not good.
Yeah, so
But
what
now,
sign do you like to?
anything that's not in the bales,
So did they dry, like, do you remember them drying pumpkins or anything like that?
no.
Or
you
they
know,
just saved their
we
pumpkins?
just saved the
Yeah.
pumpkins, and I grow pumpkins now.
Mm-hmm.
I got some pumpkin seed from some of the Indians,
Mm-hmm.
and man, I cooked some down last week. On these old cold days, I ain't got nothing to do. I go out and I built me a little kitchen out at my barn. And I go out there and build me a fire. I've got a wood stove in there and an electric, or a gas stove too. And I'll cook them pumpkins down and bring them back. And Judy in Utah, it's 10 times better than a store-bought pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
Man, it's good. And I've been growing them for the last 2 years. And I've got 2 pumpkins left now. I cooked some down the other day. And I've got 2 pumpkins left, and I'll work them up right now before. If you don't keep them in the dry, they'll rot on you, you know.
Yeah.
And I've got potatoes. I've got a few. I grow like 2 to 3 rows of tater. I grow one tater, a red tater, because they come in early, and you can you grab them on them and eat them. And I've got a friend that worked with the Forest Service, Linda Byers, that she was so good at taking care of our personal financial needs, you know, all of her records. She just worried her to death. Something wasn't right. And she loved them red potatoes. So I've been growing her a bushel of red potatoes for the last 20 years now.
Oh, yeah.
I take it to her every year.
Yeah.
But I've got my potatoes in now. In my little kitchen there, where they won't rot or, you know, so yeah. We preserve that, and then I've got some grapes. I got a grapevine, but I got the wrong kind. I got the one that had the seeds in them.
Oh, yeah.
So they're not as
good.
well. They're good flavor-wise, but
Just
they're
aggravating to eat.
aggravating to eat.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah.
spit the seed out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So when you think about, because you know what I talk about all the time is the Appalachia as a whole. Of course, a lot of what I talk about does end up focusing on not just Brasstown, but Western North Carolina, because that's where we live. But when you think about that, about living in Appalachia, what do you think the things are worth celebrating? What's the best things about living in the Appalachian Mountains?
oh, life itself. I mean, what I call we're in the slow lane. We take our time, you know. Our roads is crooked, so there's no need to get in no hurry and go visit your neighbors. You know, we don't visit anymore. I've got some neighbors out. I walked out yesterday, getting out and walking around a little bit, and I walked to my neighbors out there and sat and talked to them about 30 minutes. And they were actually from Georgia, just good home folks. But you know, people don't do what we used to do. They don't do that. And I love to visit.
Yeah.
I've got to interact. I guess this the way I am. You know, and everybody says, well, call me and let me know when you're coming over. And well, you know, we didn't used to call. You just showed up. If you're busy, all right, we'll go on. But I'm bad not to call. I'm bad just to show up. And I love to interact with people. That's the reason I built my little kitchen out there in my barn. You'll have to come up and see it sometime.
Yeah, I'd like to.
We'll do an interview up there the next time.
Yeah.
And because I cook this bad weather, I'll cook dinner. I'm not much of a cook, but I'll do a deer meatloaf. I'll do fried taters or mashed potatoes. We call them soup beans. When I call them soup beans, people say, what kind of bean is that?
I've had a lot of people ask me when
What
I
is a
say
soup
soup
bean?
beans, what is that? Can you tell me about that bean?
Yeah. And cornbread.
That's a feast.
And then I make a peach cobbler. I've got pretty good at making them peach cobblers. And that's a good meal.
Yeah, that's a feast.
Onions and some jalapeno peppers. And we dry peppers down, and we can a lot of peppers. Because fall of the year, your peppers just explode. You know, so we just can them and stuff. So we eat peppers all year round. But I just like I just like getting out and riding up Fires Creek and going up into the, what we used to call the refuge. I guess you just call it Fires Creek now. And stopping, talking to people and that interacting is
Yeah.
big to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, our society's changed for the worse for that part, for sure.
Oh yeah, big
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Clay, for talking to us today. And as you said, I'm going to come to the kitchen, but I know you're just a wealth of knowledge about Brasstown, so I hope this is the first of many interviews.
Well, you know, when you get to talking, things come to your mind, so you remember them. I was trying to think what I was going to say, and I said, I don't know. Maybe she'll ask me a question that'll
Yeah.
get me going, you
Yeah,
know. And,
yeah.
and that's what it does. That's what it takes.